We'll wait a little bit longer here. I think marketing just got off a stand-up. Cool. We can get kicked off. Small crew today. I think we did have the call starting at 11:30 in the calendar. That was revised this morning, but I suspect some people may have seen that 11:30 still. That was only last week. As a reminder, we're doing 11 o'clock sharp for the foreseeable future. We'll kind of see how this experiment goes. It worked out quite well. Last week we had a good crew, like 40 people listening at one point, but kind of feel our way through here. Check out the agenda I posted in general. So I hope you guys are having a good one. Let's see here. Yeah, kind of a different sentiment this past week with some green numbers for once. Hopefully it's further nail in the coffin of at least putting in a bottom. It feels more likely that maybe we have, but I'm still not assuming that we're out of this bearish environment yet. There's a lot of macro headwinds, protracted war in the Ukraine. Interest rates are still not favoring, a degen environment. But on the other hand, we have survived some crazy turmoil, and DeFi, of course, is looking better than ever in contrast to TradFi. So let's see. First agenda item, the tokenomics Q1 Q2 proposal is on Snapshot. This is the actual vote after clearing ideation. There were a few more posts around this that did not appear in the ideation thread specifically, but threads that people had created, or one poster had created, and then I created a thread responding to a tweet somebody had made around kind of some criticisms of the DAO overall, as well as tokenomics, and responded to all those. But if you want a thorough context of everything, give the ideation proposal a look, because that has more context. There's a character limit in Snapshot, as well as those other posts where people asked related questions. I referred to one change in the runway from ideation to the proposal where there's a month less of runway. However, after a chat I just had, it looks like perhaps we're still at the full 11 months. That's what the latest numbers show. There's been some flux there. So that brings us to the second item here. And this has been, I think, very sort of emblematic of the fact that like the runway is very much a living, breathing document that is tweaked over time as budget prediction or budget forecasts change and approved amounts via governance change. And typically there's not too much flux in there because once a work stream's budget has been approved, it's fairly consistent month over month. There always might be some one-offs or ad hoc expenses there, but typically it's predictable. One thing that is in flux right now is there are various work stream proposals that they're working their way through the governance process. There is the globalization work stream, which is actually live right now. I know Tyler is pushing the ops through right now. That's live. or not live yet, but that's in the forum. Um, Marketing, of course. So there's a lot going on, and what I do is as soon as a proposal is passed, I just factor in those new costs. I usually do not factor in anything that isn't passed yet, just because we want to actually have clarity on that via governance. So those variables you typically don't shift too much. One expense, however, came to light in the past week or so, and this was related to infrastructure spending um, for like supporting the nodes that we run primarily. So, kind of the big picture here is that this expense was previously borne by the Fox Foundation, and as part of just this, effort to continue to uh, sort of wind down those operations and move everything to the DAO and maximize the DAO's decentralization. The DAO itself is now bearing those costs. So this logically is a line item under the engineering workstreams spend. So kind of what the revelation of this new expense has obviously added some more to the engineering workstreams budget, and then furthermore, there's kind of some flux in terms of how much this will be every month. Once all things considered equal, that it should be fairly stable. However, there's a lot going on here. So most of the cost, and I want to thank DeFi, Kevin, Marley, and Scott for helping explain more of this to me just this morning. But most of this cost is related to running nodes, of course. Ethereum, these are not essential for the blockchain to operate in a trustless fashion. However, they are important to providing data in a timely fashion. We could rely on Etherscan for that data. However, that kind of opens this up to an edge case where maybe there's a lag in that data, or Etherscan just isn't presenting that data in a timely fashion. And if that happens, the app's or ShapeShift's functionality will suffer. Hence, that's a cost as well, running those nodes. You might be wondering how Archeo would play into all this. I certainly was. So running Archeo could actually be an extra cost potentially on top of all this. Sounds like not a big one, but it could be a marginal added cost when that happens. Of course, for the near term, Archeo is still in development, so this is not yet a factor. But it would be wrong to assume that these costs will sort of disappear once Archeo is a thing. We'll be leveraging that architecture, but also running our own infra as we currently are. So if that changes over time, well, that'll certainly get factored into these costs. But sort of the TLDR is this infrastructure spending comprises an estimated maybe $25K a month moving forward. Again, this number could change. There may be some opportunities to reduce those costs. One would be just switching AWS regions could possibly lead to some good savings, although there would be an associated cost there, and it is a bit of a lift to take a new snapshot, put it on point it towards a new region and create that. Additionally, the taxi stake share of this infrastructure, because taxi stake is actually operating this infrastructure on behalf of ShapeShift, there's potentially some wiggle room there, or some variability in terms of how much taxi stake is taking. And Marley and Scott have been great about discussing options there. So there's certainly some variability, but I think the conservative approach here is to assume that the DAO will continue to or be spending $25K a month on this infra, of which falls under the engineering work streams budget. So upon learning more about this, I have a hand in the audience here. Okay. Upon learning more about this recently, I added on this infrastructure spending onto the existing engineering workstream cost, which in turn raised the workstream spend to over 100K a month, and then that actually extrapolating that lopped off a a full month from the runway. However, upon talking to the crew this morning and getting a clearer sense of the labor costs of engineering versus infra, it looks like I was adding too much. So this sounds like a lot of detail. I want to refer you guys to the runway spreadsheet here. I'll post it in the old stage chat. Yeah, Willie. So with respect to Archeo, that's kind of my thought too. But it sounds like talking to Kevin and DeFi, Marley and Scott. It would be a misnomer to assume that it would decrease in a substantial way. They could probably provide some more color on that. Yeah, and additionally, and John, you point out a related current concern or thought that came up during that discussion. We shouldn't rely on Archeo exclusively. So, of course, we need that needs to be very stable architecture in order for us to really leverage that. But that could change over time. And in any case, I think it's wonderful that ShapeShift will be the first user of Archeo based on that proposal. So. Please reference the spreadsheet. So this is the latest and greatest. I literally was just updating this a few months ago based on the conversation I had this morning. But here we are. We're at that 11 months of runway. Our stablecoin balance has dropped per the dashboard. However, most of the spend has already been allocated for January. You can see that in Colony, so thus the total spend is less. And then here we are at that current estimate. Bouncing over to the separate tabs for February and March, the budgets. This is what I want to draw your attention to specifically. So this is kind of where I always update the work stream specific budgets depending on various factors. Like if somebody says, oh hey Kent, we're going to have like an extra one-off expense of like 15K for ETH Denver or this or that, and of course as proposals change the amount that's allocated to work streams, I change that. I feel like the infrastructure spending is something that could change over time. Thus, I've kind of added that as a separate line item here. Of course, it does fall under engineering, but I thought it made sense to sort of highlight both of these. So for February, you can see that labor for engineering is only about 48K, and then 25K we have for engineering or for infra. It might be a little bit less than that for infra, but that's kind of where we're at. Typically, and as you'll see in the March budget, engineering is somewhat higher. And the reason for that difference is one of the members of the engineering workstream has elected to go full Fox for February. And then in March, it'll be back to USDC. But that's kind of what we're looking at. So if you're ever curious about what comprises the monthly budget that goes into the runway projection spreadsheet, it's exactly this. And then you can, it's also nice. You can see in this fancy ass bar chart here that, just the relative difference in terms of spending and all that good stuff. Check the stage chat. Yeah, my pleasure, Willie. I see it as like sort of job number one is to just leverage, the on-chain data and what I know about the budgets via those different sources to just always maintain an accurate view. So that's kind of where we're at. And I apologize for the bit of back and forth. Initially upon factoring this infrastructure cost, it looked like we had a month less of runway. This morning I realized I was adding on that figure to a number that already incorporated some of that spending. Thus, that no longer applies. But in any case, I don't want to get too myopic here and talk really like split hairs in terms of okay, it's a month here, a month there. But I think the most important thing is that we have a good sense of like essentially how much runway the DAO has, and that's precisely what I aim to do here by always keeping this updated. Um, so last Tuesday was our big exciting discussion with Bond Protocol, where we talked about the I mean, at the highest level, really, okay, given our current runway, um, what does this mean for the DAO? Like, what are our options for moving forward? We heard from Bond Protocol analyzing the potential price impact of the short-term bond offerings on the price of Fox, and talked about potential ways to move forward. Again, I think, and this is in my own humble opinion, I think it would be wise further stablecoin allocation. Now that we've kind of taken a break here, this would basically extend the runway. I think in a meaningful amount, and do so in a way that the targeted amount would really be much less than the prior 50K a week that was targeted in an effort to pay off the RARI bonds. So this essentially, if we were to employ that strategy, this would amount to much less Fox being sold for a discount via the Bond Protocol route if the DAO did decide to do that. Specifically, I analyze that strategy, or get some projections on that in the tab that says stablecoins plus 50,000 a month. So you can see here, if we did start to accumulate 50K via stables, or this could also be revenue too. The DAO is sort of pre-revenue here, but I think we had 5,000 in the most recent month. But revenue could certainly offset expenses as well. But for all intents and purposes, let's just say 50K via Bond Protocol right now, or perhaps other means. But this extends the runway from November of 2023 to February of 2024. That targeting maybe 12.5K a week, it does extend the runway in a meaningful way. As a reminder, last week I presented sort of like, a 16-month target is something that might be good to have for a runway. This was based solely on the length of the prior bear market. Of course, past performance does not guarantee future performance, and it's a very limited sample size of one, just looking at the prior bear market. However, it's it feels like a reasonable, educated guess. If the bear market were to end sooner, that would be great, but we don't want to make any assumptions. That's been one common constant theme of tokenomics, is never the DAO should never be in a position where we have to rely on assumptions to succeed. In other words, for example, like, we don't have to assume anything about the price of Fox in terms of this runway, because it's denominated in stable coins. If you factor in Fox, then of course our treasury is much higher, and I do have a separate tab for that that I'll actually have to update shortly here. And then of course we have some other crypto assets as well in the treasury. But that's kind of the big picture stuff. I think the main takeaway, is, again, it doesn't take a big effort in terms of acquiring more stables to extend the runway in a meaningful way. John says things do change as volumes and markets pick up. Lots more Fox volumes. Yeah, so this is, that's a great point, and I actually haven't plugged those numbers in, and I think I will right after this call, John. John points out even 100K in stable accumulation a month would increase the runway substantially, and that's less than half of what we had before. I chose kind of as just to get a sense of what a relatively small amount will look like. We could perhaps that could be sustainable. I think one takeaway from the Bond Protocol analysis is there were no real clear indications that there is substantial price pressure put on the price of Fox via the bond sales. Certainly, probably some, but their analysis was really nuanced and pretty solid. Another interesting data point is just looking at the relative performance of Fox versus ETH. Since that, we're just approaching that right now, the 3 weeks. I believe it was 3 weeks. So Fox essentially continued to underperform ETH until recently. There is a very substantial spike. As I think, you know, somebody or a group of somebody's purchased a substantial amount of Fox, and this maybe has kicked off some short-term relative strength. So it'll be interesting to watch that moving forward. As always, I never ever want to talk too much about the price of Fox. We don't want to do anything that will nuke the price, and of course, we never want to do anything in an attempt to artificially juice the price. But as always, I think the price of Fox will follow our success over the long run. I see Josh on the stage. What's happening, Josh?
Hey, Kent. Yeah, thanks for leading these conversations as always. I am against starting bonds, particularly like we just finished them. Like I think the impact of bond sales just ended like the last one. Just sell Fox because it's very clear from what the bond protocol team showed us last week that those big bond purchases are being arbed. I mean, that's what's happening, and I just don't see a reason why we should pay that extra percent on it. But mostly, I would just like to use bond sales for a while.
Anytime soon. I think it's still worth the experiment, even if we decrease runway by a few months, to just kind of let things play out and see how things go. That being said, I don't agree with Josh with your takeaway there from what we got from Bond Protocol the other week. If anything, to me, that was actually said that the bonds were more efficient than selling on open market, even with the ARBs, because you have the fact that X amount was held. For example, I think the range there was on like 9 to 11% difference was like basically meant that we performed about 9 to 11% better. I think it was like 20% hold or 25 something. Basically made up a difference of actually being more efficient than selling at market. So I actually had a opposite takeaway from that. That doesn't mean that we do that right away, but I did not see that as a indicator that selling at market was more efficient.
I didn't quite. I believe that, I know that you have good logic in looking at these things. Can you walk me through the logic? Because I did not make that conclusion, so I'd love to get to that same place.
Yeah, basically they said that when they did the analysis, something like 77, I think it was like to 82% of it got sold or arbed over time. So the difference there is what you factor in is basically, okay, what did we sell it at a discount versus what percentage then was held? So the difference there should mean, so in this case, if you had, say, 20% was held and there was a 10% discount, that actually means that we performed about approximately 10% better than we would have selling at market because of the amount that was held. So it doesn't take a large percentage of the bonds to be held to perform better than just selling directly at market, is my point. And that seemed to be in their data.
And so 20% meaning was purchased and never sold?
Correct.
And then I'm curious then of like, did we see how that spanned out over like the most recent tranche, right? So because if in the very beginning, if people were holding it, right, and they just did like a lump sum, but like in the most recent tranche, whenever we did that at the end of December, or maybe it was in the middle, what percentage of the most recent tranche was held versus sold, I wonder?
It was a slightly lower percentage, I think, with the LUSD bond, if that's what you're referring to, but it was like a 2% difference.
So it's kind of standard across each of the offerings. 20%.
Yeah, the point, and the point here is not necessarily to get stuck on any of those specific numbers, particularly because we're not trying to necessarily do more bonds right away, or at least I wouldn't do that either. The point is simply that it's not as simple as like, oh, selling at market is just better, because if even a small percentage end up being held of the bonds, and you factor in the discount, that's actually more efficient than selling at market. That was actually one of my big takeaways from that.
I get that logic. I'm curious. I think we can just move on from here. I got some more questions kind of about how like the mechanic, like basically, is it like a 1-to-1? So if 20% are held and we're selling it at 10% discount, is the math just a 1-to-1, a directly kind of proportional relationship? I don't know. I think I have to think about that a little bit
Yeah,
more.
we might. Definitely, to be fair, what I'm doing here is generally approximate rough math. So it
Yeah,
would be fair to do a more detailed analysis on that. But the point is that that amount held actually makes a big difference, because you assume
I
that
got you.
when the
I
DAO
understand
sells
that.
directly at market, that's 100% just being dumped at market
Yeah,
versus some percentage that is not.
yeah. That does make sense. Thank you.
I
Willie,
know
did you
our
have a?
opinions pretty much align well with John's. And again, I'm not saying we should start bonds anytime soon. I do think it's important to keep kind of an open mind about bonds and not just say, oh, bonds are objectively terrible. And I do think there's things we can do. Like if you look at the recent Olympus bonds, they had a lot more success of people buying bonds at a lower discount and having much fewer ARBs. So I do think like simple stuff like putting the button on the Fox page to buy Fox at a discount is an additional thing that we could do to help decrease the amount that's ARBed and hopefully get it more into the hand of long-term hodlers. And I do think Ocean makes a good point too, that some of these bond purchasers could very well could be cannibalizing like Fox sales that we'd have on the open market anyways. What I mainly wanted to say is that I still am pretty anti the DAO just like directly selling it for a couple of reasons. It's also just a tricky thing to or it's an extra thing for the signers to coordinate basically, and tricky to like time the market. But if we ever do go down that path, I do think something that's better than just direct sales that we've talked about before is one-sided liquidity providing on Uniswap v3, and having the DAO basically, instead of just dumping Fox on the market, adding liquidity just in Fox above the price. The drawback is that it doesn't actually get sold unless the price goes up. But the benefit is that it's more passive, and another benefit is that we're only selling the Fox above the current price. There's no discount. And it's not, I think it would be much better optics for the DAO to do that, even though it's not much different than if the DAO were to just go out there and dump, especially when we have like a liquidity mining program going and we're incentivizing our community to go provide liquidity and then dumping on them. I think it's just a really bad look, and it's something that we haven't ever done. And I for one, would prefer for the DAO to never go down that path if it can avoid it. So
Well, that's an interesting. The one-sided liquidity a little bit above the. It's kind of almost like placing a limit order in a way, right?
exactly.
Yeah. Are you then suggesting that if when that price gets hit, that we then pull some of, if it gets converted into ETH, that we then pull the ETH and sell that to stables? Is that kind of the whole round trip?
Exactly. And we could even do it just on a Fox USDC pool or LUSD, whichever pool, if we wanted to just go get the stables there.
Yeah.
But it's another good point. In order to actually realize the sale, we'd have to pull that liquidity before like the price would
Before
go
it
down.
goes back the other way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think if we ever go down that path, that is a strategy that I would be much more in favor of than just like direct Fox sales. And again, yeah, I think for now I'm in favor of pausing kind of anything and letting the runway decrease a little bit for the next couple months to see to measure. But yeah, if we ever go down the path of considering direct Fox sales, I would strongly advocate for one-sided LPing on Uniswap.
Yeah, I would totally think about that idea more. Okay, cool. All right, I'm done. Thanks, Kent.
Thanks, guys, for the thoughts. One thing I want to say in terms of the pause on any additional allocation, I think that was very much in the spirit of what the TMDC had talked about, and this is what's happening now. I would caution though against kind of just having this sort of nebulous, indefinite delay. And certainly we have some runway to work with right now, and burning a couple months of that potentially, is not going to be the end of the world. However, if we just sort of continue that ad nauseum, we run the risk of a shitty scenario. Specifically, the one I'm thinking of is where the bear market continues, or at least the bear market in Fox. We've had a bit of a respite from this awful in long-term downtrend in crypto and in Fox. It's nice to see that, but keep in mind we very, very recently hit all-time lows on Fox, and the asset has done nothing but trend lower for months and months. You know, one thing that maybe could change potentially is, okay, maybe Fox will stop trending lower, for example, if we're not doing the bond program, or based on different market conditions. But the thing that concerns me is where we burn an arbitrary amount of runway, you know, really eating into that, and then the bear market continues, and Fox, you know, winds up dropping a new all-time lows, and then it's a cent and a half or a cent. At that point, it takes a lot more for Fox to raise those those stables, and that puts us in a worse situation. So perhaps something like, and maybe I need to do this myself in terms of my own opinion, but like what is the minimum amount of runway that we would be comfortable with? Because there is that risk factor that emerges, and I would urge everybody not to get lulled into complacency by this little bit of a bounce we've had here, because bull market or bear market rallies certainly happen, and they don't signify an end to the bearish conditions. They just are a little bit of a retracement. Not to say that's going to happen here. Who knows what's going to happen, but those are kind of some thoughts there. But I do concur that we can stay paused as of right now. Another thing to keep in mind is that we do have the Arbor tokens from that longer term offering. The TMDC hasn't quite decided next steps for that, but it looks like we could take these remaining tokens. Again, these are remaining tokens from the long-term offering that was done recently. The DAO raised, I think, 93K via that method. And the thought now is like potentially we could take those leftover tokens and sell them on the secondary market. Arbor presented a way to do that via 1inch that I believe would work with the Gnosis chain multisig. So that's another thought. Of course, again, no guarantee that we would raise funds that way, but it's another potential way to accumulate stables. And of course, another other big factor here is, at some point, I would hopefully, at least in 2023, we start to generate a meaningful amount of revenue, which would also change the calculus here. But currently, that doesn't exist, so we don't want to make any assumptions about that. Oh, John. Okay, John says when the runway gets to the 8 to 9 month range. Yeah, that kind of is what I was thinking as well. We have some runway to burn here, but falling under that would start to feel pretty hot and under the collar. Yeah, grant money would be nice too. It kind of feels like tokenomics chat or / TMDC chat. Good stuff. T-Shifty says we should do everything to stop the DAO from selling directly on the open market. Yeah, that's certainly that's something that the DAO has not done so far, thanks to things like bond protocol. Yes, and then the Archeo. This is could be a very important factor in terms of the DAO's Archeo tokens in the treasury. Which should acquire some value if the project succeeds. I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Perhaps you might know, John, but is there a current rough estimate for when the first airdrop? It's my understanding there might be a series of airdrops, but kind of a guesstimate as far as when the first airdrop might occur for Archeo?
Yeah, I mean, there's no. Basically, the timeline still is aiming for Q1 to get mainnet launched. I don't have a lot more degree of timing past that yet, unfortunately, that sharing would be worthwhile. And the airdrop will be basically right around when mainnet launches. So the hope is that's Q1. I would say that I have about maybe 65, 75% confidence level even in that Q1 projection. It's possible it could leak into early Q2. I hope not. but that's about the best I can give right now.
Cool. Which is about as good as you're going to get in, when you have the convergence of crypto and development, which are always in flux. But thanks for the estimate. Let's see. John, you also allude to something here that is worth bringing up. You say 8 to 9 months runway if we haven't seen revenue increases or significant cost reductions. So one thing I mentioned in my proposal is that in terms of runway extension, further budget reductions kind of felt like a non-starter. Just talking to the various work stream leaders at the retreat. This isn't. I'm not making a. We don't want to. We don't always know for sure that there's going to be sufficient demand. If those things don't happen, then the DAO has no choice but to reduce its budget. So, yeah, interesting factors to keep an eye on here. Yeah, and this discussion about selling Fox has certainly been very, very controversial. I think over the past year, it's an interesting discussion to have. As this discussion continues in the chat, in the meantime, if anybody has anything else they want to talk about, please let me know or jump up on stage. I'm actually at the end of my planned discussions here. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that we'll be doing a strategy session here. I was trying to get a sense of when more people might be available, but this will happen the final week of January. This will encompass certainly some tokenomics related things. It will not be a tokenomics specific discussion though, but rather a higher level like strategy thing where we really, the main goal is to ensure that some of the themes and things we talked about at the DAO retreat continue to kind of remain top of mind, and maybe ultimately maybe in a way they can help the DAO get more focus. Hey, what's up, Tyler?
GM, sir. My first post in the stage chat there about walking down the road of consequences of the DAO selling Fox on the open market was a little bit aimed at you. And I guess maybe to like lead it up even more would be, I recognize that we're not the only DAO in existence. There are other people out there that are managing treasuries. Do you have any firsthand experience or anecdotes around consequences of folks who have chosen that the appropriate strategy to do would be to sell their native token on the open market? Is there any way that we can learn from experiences of others in these? I feel like there's a lot of charged emotion around like the presentation of this or what this could mean. And I'd love to pick your brain and your experience about this maybe in like a larger connotation outside of just our specific ShapeShift view.
Those are excellent questions. Let's see. So off the top of my head, I don't have any specific examples of a DAO raising staples via its direct sales of its native token. But I do know that successful DAOs, by successful I mean those that have been able to establish a product market fit and able to sustain themselves through different types of markets, have diversified treasuries. Personally, I argued for selling Fox. This is before Bond Protocol or Olympus was really being used by the DAO or available. But I was arguing in early Q1 last year, saying we have all this money in the treasury, and holy shit, we could be entering a bear market. I mentioned this before, but one of my regrets is not being more vociferous for that, because we could have had at some point I think the treasury was valued at like 300 million. It would not have taken a good chunk of that to raise a meaningful amount of stables. On the same token, we have we've gone through a process becoming more lean and mean, and perhaps that is the best route moving forward. I was never one who subscribed to the notion that like the optics of selling Fox would be bad. Like, okay, some people might say, well, God, they're dumping on us, you know, but at the end of the day, the DAO has these assets for a reason, to fund its ongoing development, you know. And if you care about the long-term viability of ShapeShift and want Fox to appreciate over the long run, the most important thing, and the number one threat, I should say, is the Treasury not having adequate funds. So, in other words, you know, I view kind of the optics thing as like a kind of a loose, sort of like wishy-washy type thing. It's kind of this potential perception that might have, but unequivocally, one thing that is absolutely a concern to everybody that owns a token is whether or not the DAO has sufficient funds in its treasury. So, you know, selling Fox directly, if the DAO chose to do that, certainly would be a way to go about that. To clarify, I'm not advocating that right now, but that's a great question in terms of, you know, looking at other, you know, case studies of DAOs. But I do know that running out of money has been fatal for many projects, and that's you know, at the end of the day, that's the number one thing that I think you know, the DAO needs to prevent. So not that we need to take any action right now, and what's the best way forward, I'm not sure, but yeah, I hope that answers your question more effectively. I'm sorry for not being able to answer more precisely with case studies of other DAOs, but those are kind of my general thoughts.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it at least sets the stage. I appreciate it. And I guess I wonder what crashing into the iceberg looks like in DAO land, and maybe this is something for us to explore further. So we do have a whole bunch of data points on different strategies. Maybe everyone flails the same way. Maybe there's a way that we could learn from that and do differently.
By crashing into the iceberg, do you sort of mean more specifically like running out of money?
Yeah, in the stage chat, it's referred to as like the death spiral, I guess, where we hit that point that selling on the open market is not worth the value anymore. It's just depleted it completely, or the market's not even available to sell the tokens on. And yeah, the Titanic iceberg metaphor would be what that point is, that event horizon.
Oh, okay. So sort of what T-Shifty was alluding to. I would argue that the death spiral happens more so, and we have seen this with a number of, most obviously with like a lot of ICO projects that didn't diversify out of ETH, and then ETH went down. But I think the death spiral happens when, okay, let's say the DAO ran out of stable coins and is thus having to sell Fox, or I should say exclusively use Fox to incentivize contributors. Those contributors, in turn, sell their Fox immediately in order to fund their living expenses, which causes more pressure on the price of Fox, spiraling down. Meanwhile, token holders, they assess the treasury as being in a poor state because there is no diversification, and it is primarily held in this rapidly depreciating asset. This leads them to sell the token because they don't have any faith that the project will be financially sustainable, and that can trigger the death spiral. I would argue that the simple act of issuing tokens on the open market itself would not trigger that type of death spiral. Of course, the DAO would have to be nimble and careful about how much you know, the market could absorb, how much it intended to sell. But yeah, that's, and I kind of talked about that last week too. That's the death spiral I would be concerned about, is the one where the DAO is running out of anything but Fox. If that yeah, thanks for that question, Tyler. GK says, as a user, I see the platform selling, time to dump. True, we did have no runway a while back. Fox was much higher at that point. The runway, I think, is much more than a bonus position. The runway is absolutely crucial. You know, it's something that everybody working with the DAO and everybody involved with the DAO, including token holders, can 100% count on. I mean, assuming any, you know, no crazy risks or issues happen with like our stablecoin holdings themselves. There's always some risks around those, but similar to how a startup counts on a certain amount of runway, and this is very important for its employees and investors, is much more than just a nice thing to have. It's absolutely essential, particularly for a platform that has not yet reached, that is A, pre-revenue, and is B, has not reached any sort of product market fit. I, along with many of you, am optimistic that we'll reach that, but that runway is so important to ensuring our survival. And if it's denominated in Fox, there's really, we have a massive risk in terms of again, people, contributors immediately selling their Fox, which engenders more selling, and then B, kind of just having a treasury denominated in a asset that's depreciating rapidly. So that's highly risky to just rely on Fox, and something I personally would never support. Ocean says, I think it's really hard to say either approach is different to the price of Fox. There may be an optics different. Yeah, so yeah, depending on your perspective, I think optics certainly maybe could be better for the bonds, but in any case, this does result in Fox hitting the market one way or the other. So there certainly is sort of an impact that way. Yeah, John, in terms of finding other creative ways to raise stables, that sort of begs the question, what would be those ways? Willie mentioned grants. That could be wonderful. Of course, we do have this proven method via Arbor for longer term bonds. If, and that's a big if, the market continues to kind of recover off these relative lows, perhaps there could be more demand for those longer term bonds, and the DAO could try selling or trying those bond offerings again, which would be interesting. Yeah, time locked Fox via hedges, things similar to Success Token. Yeah, Josh says there's an agreement not to sell Fox right now in any shape. I think that's reasonable for currently. I would be like sort of again like I want to be cautious against this idea that we have to like oh no like basically that we have to be too concerned about short-term price of Fox as an important metric, because like ultimately the DAO needs to build something of use to people. If it's going to have value, we need that runway. But yeah, I think for the short term, holding off on any additional diversification is good. And again, guys, this is only, I'm up here talking, but this is just my own opinion as the workstream leader. Ultimately, the TMDC is tasked with figuring this shit out collectively. So yeah, it's fun to be able to have these discussions and not talk about Rari anymore. And I appreciate the wide range of perspectives here. It's certainly one of those topics that's like very visceral and very anybody that has Fox and is invested in this project with their time and their treasure. It's like such a very important thing, and I love how everybody brings their perspectives. Justin's wondering if we plan to support Solana. I think I heard Solana pop up on a product roadmap discussion recently. I think there is, maybe via a wallet integration, I think. And it'll be interesting to see how that project evolves. So, yeah, gosh, we filled up all that time just chatting about this. That's pretty cool. Cool. I think we can start to wind down here. I'm going to stall a little bit longer. Firebomb, I see you chatting. Thanks again for joining us in an odd time zone for you. I know it's late. Oh yeah, yeah. So Justin, if you want to ping the product team or ask during their office hours, it's a good question for them. I wish I had a crystal ball. That would be much easier to figure out how to handle all this. But again, like if you zoom out, the DAO is in, I think, a relatively strong position with respect to its finances, in the sense that, you know, there's no more of this awful short-term high interest debt. There is a meaningful runway, and we have some proven methods to extend that runway. And yeah, the TMDC, our deliberations and our chats are always open to everybody. They happen twice a week, 3:30 today, actually, every Tuesday at 3:30, and then every Thursday at 4 after the governance call, and anybody is welcome to join those. Yeah, Arbor was a great fit. Also, you know, we do have the Hourglass thing that was, and it's kind of sort of, I guess, live would be the best term. That is out there. We could try to see if that can, you know, that might provide some utility and some value. Maybe we could, or maybe we could change some variables there. That's an option. Arbor certainly worked out well, I think, in terms of that goal of just having long-term debt without a liquidation point. So, yeah, thank you, Tyler, and everybody else for the questions. I think, you know, as long as we continue to sort of, you know, have good projections based on the actual data, and you know, always be mindful of this stuff, and always try to look ahead and look at potential, you know, threats and maybe opportunities for new ways to allocate or diversify. We'll be in good shape. And with that, guys, I think I'll wind it up. I got some leftover Indian food in the fridge that I'm about to get down on. And yeah, again, like the purpose of the TMDC is really to decide what to do with the DAO's treasury within the bounds of governance, the allocate or the scope that was given to the TMDC via governance. So everybody's always welcome in that. And again, for to kind of get a sense of where things could be headed, or kind of what the kind of prevailing opinions are, or different opinions, also minority opinions, always look at the governance forum, because this is a place where you will see token holders who have a say in governance. They perhaps might not be speaking up in Discord, but you'll see these opinions emerge in the forum, and of course via their votes as well. So as we have a new round of proposals getting voted on, I think that'll be an interesting dynamic too. So thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back again, 11 o'clock next week. We'll continue to do this for the near term here. But thank you for listening, and have an awesome day.